Praveen Tipirneni. I'm the CEO of Morphic Therapeutic. When we were looking to out-license one of our programs, that was obviously a very important question. And I think there's two big criteria there. One of them is to think about, whether it's a right fit from a technology and a science standpoint, because there are some companies that have strategic interest in certain spaces, and that's important for a long-term commitment. But the other one, which is relationships. So unlike a number of other potential partners, Janson was one, this is one of those cases where the relationships actually were really deep on all different levels. I mean, all the way from Matai, who was a friend of mine, all the way to previous bosses, to friends, to colleagues, to mentors. And so I think this is another way to think about partnerships, is that, when there's a long-term relationships on lots of different levels, and there's a trust and a interest in working together because of previous relationships, partners, potential partners try to find ways to work together, like where it makes sense and things like that. And so this was actually a case where really the relationship drove the partnership, because we were searching for ways to work with each other just because everyone had so much mutual respect for each other. Yeah, I think the collaborations, especially these early stage collaborations, it's funny, in business development, people love the billion-dollar deal, the big dollars and things like that. But these early stage collaborations are oftentimes way more complicated, certainly from a business development standpoint. I used to love when training BD folks to start with the early stage collaborations, because they're just so much more complicated with the governance and the IP and things like that. So sometimes not flashy, but in terms of complexity, it's very, very high on these early ones. And so because of that, though, navigating the organization that you want to partner with, and in both the technical side as well as the deal side for these early stage collaborations, is actually a really big, good marker of how you will work together. And so if you're seeing all kinds of red flags there about how nobody is budging on deal terms, and the vision isn't the same and things like that, I mean, that's a really good marker that it probably is not going to work out in the future. I think this is actually a really great example of that, because when Mark Arian is at Janson, he's the head of cardiometabolic at Janson, and when he said, I want a true collaboration here, right? I said, it's not a collaboration where you guys will do all the work and then, come back to us and then we will be on the governance committee. I really wanted a collaboration. He says, I really wanted a collaboration where both teams are going to be working close side by side. And then he looked at me and I said, me too. And he was super surprised. He's like, you do? Right? You want a collaboration like that? Because that's a hard collaboration. That's not an easy collaboration. It's much easier when you're working within your company. But when you have to work across companies, especially in close collaboration, that's a difficult thing to do. So why was I interested in that collaboration, and why are a lot of people not interested in that collaboration? Because when you have really hard problems, you want cognitive diversity. You want that, and I think it can be diversity in the way we often think about it with gender, ethnicity, and things like that. But in this case, that's a marker of cognitive diversity. And here, it's actually pretty straightforward way. I mean, there are lots of studies on it, but there's a fairly straightforward way to think about it, is that each different person brings a different set of perspectives, a different set of heuristics, a different set of models. And so if you have super high ability folks, but all with the same perspectives, the same models, the same heuristics, you're not going to get at those parts of the solution that you would with a much more diverse set. And so it was a very simple way of thinking about it. In this particular collaboration, we're working on very novel biology, very complex problems. And although, it is a challenge getting these collaborations both negotiated and operational, the chance of success in the longer term is much better. In this case, unlike other collaborations we have where the teams know each other so well on so many different levels, right? And so I think in this case, it usually is a big challenge, because just the different companies have different ways of operating. Like, for example, we have a collaboration with AbbVie as well as a collaboration with Janson, and the two collaborations are completely different. How AbbVie, and no no better or worse than each other, but just different because the cultures are different, the way they operate is different. I think in the case with Janson, it is a more complex collaboration just because it's earlier stage and it's at a more nascent stage. But because the relationships have been so strong that in what would have been a big challenge, I think with other companies, with Janson hasn't been a big challenge just because there's been so much trust and relationship that's been long-standing. Sometimes 20 plus years of knowing each other. I think I do have a perspective on this that is a little bit different. I think when people talk about culture, oftentimes what you hear is about perks. So these are food every day, the ping pong tables and things like that. And I'm not saying there's a right or wrong to it. I mean, we don't have food every day, even though lots of people say you need to have food every day, otherwise you can't attract anybody. We don't have it, and I don't think that you need it. But again, there's no right or wrong answer there. But that's not culture. I think the culture has to be specific to your mission and what you're trying to accomplish, as an objective. And so I think a simple way to think about it, though, is that it's really about the people you retain, because a thought exercise I always do is, okay, if we talk about cultures and companies, if all the people leave, is there a culture left? So in some ways, it is really about the people, right, and who you're hiring and things like that. And so for me, when I think about our culture and what we are trying to accomplish, difficult problems, really staying close to the science, high ability, people who are serious in getting medicines to patients. These are all things that I value. And I think one representation of it that for me shows what's important to me and then filters down is that, when we are doing our board meetings, I think it's probably the only board in the world that has never seen a PowerPoint slide. And for me, I like people writing and I like their narrative, because I think of when you think of science and scientists, what do you think of? You think of journal articles, you think of science, you think of nature and things like that. And why would you try to dumb that down? And so, but I think by putting that effort into the board meetings, it shows kind of what's important to me and it filters all the way down. So those are the things that I think are what matters to me from a culture perspective. I think the challenge has been growth, to tell you the truth, is that in some ways, we've had somewhat of there's always ups and downs, but we've had somewhat of a charmed existence until, last November. And with the imminent movement of our assets into development, with the 2 collaborations, we've grown from 30 to above 60. Now we're going to 80. And so, kind of the rise of development, the more than doubling of the workforce has certainly brought in all kinds of challenges over the last few months that we didn't have to deal with. So we're, in some ways, I think we're catching up with all the processes. I think we thought about our culture, we thought about our processes very carefully, and so we've had a pretty seamless route to this point. But I think now, actually, the momentum hit so fast that now we're starting to catch up. You really want to be very what's the best way? Very choosy about who you work with, and that's on so many different levels. Be very choosy about the first few people you bring in, because that's going to determine, your culture and your standards for a very long time. Be very choosy about your partners. Be very choosy about your investors. You can't be perfectly discriminatory in all these situations, but to the ability that you can, really try to get the right partners for you, the right people for you, because that's going to make everything so much easier, and you spend more time with all these folks than you do with your family when you're in this type of situation. So that's going to have all kinds of downstream positive effects if you pick very carefully.